What's going on, guys? It's Greg here, aka NYPrepper. In this video, I'm going to do a long-range penetration test with my 300 Win Mag rifle, and I'm going to be shooting at some 2x12 lumber from 500 yards away. And the purpose of this test is to see what kind of penetration we get at 500 yards with a 300 Win Mag, and more importantly, what kind of expansion we get. And expansion is really important at long distances, because at long distances a bullet's velocity will drop off, and many times the impact velocity at extreme ranges is not enough to expand a bullet properly. So we're going to see if we get good expansion, and we're going to see if we get good penetration. And I'm going to be using some factory ammo for this test, and I'm going to be testing 3 different types of bullets. I'm going to be testing some Barnes LRX, which is a solid copper expanding bullet, and the LRX is designed for expansion at long ranges. So we're going to put this bullet to the test and see if it actually expands the way that Barnes claims it does at long ranges. I'm also going to test some Nosler Accubonds, and Nosler Accubond is kind of a medium to long range bullet. It will expand down to 1700 feet per second impact velocity. And finally, I'm going to test just a basic 180 grain soft point cup and core, nothing fancy. So the ammo I'm going to use for the Barnes LRX is some choice ammunition, and it's the 175 grain Barnes LRX, and I have chronographed this load out of my rifle, and I get around 2,850 feet per second at the muzzle. And these bullets have a ballistic coefficient of 0.508. So basically the same ballistics coefficient as the 180 grain Accubond, which is the other bullet I'm going to use for this test. And so this is Underwood ammo, and this is their 180 grain Accubond, and I have chronographed this one also at around 2,850 feet per second out of my 20-inch barrel Ruger M77 Hawkeye Alaskan. So it's actually really good for this test, because the choice ammunition 175 grain LRX and the Underwood ammo 180 grain Nosler Accubond have basically the same velocity and almost the same ballistics coefficient. So it's going to make it really easy for me to do my ballistics calculations, because they're basically the same. And then for the regular 180 grain soft point, we're going to be using some Federal non-typical whitetail soft point, and I'm not sure who makes the bullet for this one, but it's just a basic cup and core bullet, I believe. I'm not sure if it's bonded or anything. It doesn't say anything about bonding, but I've chronographed this one out of my 20-inch barrel Ruger M77 Hawkeye Alaskan, and I get around 2,800 feet per second. So these are not the hottest 300 Win Mag rounds. Okay, most 300 Win Mags will push a 180 grain bullet over 3,000 feet per second. But for this test, it's actually good, because I don't have to shoot at extreme distances to get the same effect. If I were to use the really hot 300 Win Mag stuff that I have that can push a 180 grain bullet out of my 20-inch barrel rifle here at 3,000 feet per second, I would have to shoot at 700 or 800 yards to get the same effect as I will with these at 500 yards. And it's much easier to do this test at 500 yards than 800 yards. So I want to just show you guys these rounds up close. So on the right here, we have the Underwood ammo 180 grain Accubond. Okay, this is a bonded bullet. BC is 0.507. And here we have the Barnes LRX from Choice Ammunition. Okay, 175 grains. Has a ballistics coefficient of 0.508. And then here we have the Federal non-typical soft point, and this one has a ballistics coefficient of 0.441. Okay, so these are the rounds we're going to use for this test. And again, 500 yards, 2x12 lumber. So this is what we're going to use for the test, guys. Just some 2x12 lumber I cut to 18-inch lengths. And what I do is I screw these boards together. I put a screw in each corner. So I have a giant block of wood with these boards screwed together. And I'm going to place 2 blocks of 10 boards stacked next to each other at 500 yards. And we're going to see how many of these boards these different loads will penetrate through, and we're going to see what kind of expansion we get. And so the impact velocity at 500 yards with these rounds is going to be right around 2,000 feet per second. So it's still got a lot of velocity at 500 yards. So 2,000 feet per second is still well above what the Accubond can expand at. Nosler says 1,700 feet per second for an Accubond, and Barnes says, I think, 1,600 feet per second for the LRX, but some people say a little more than that. Some people say you can go down to 1,500. So around 2,000 feet per second will be the impact velocity at 500 yards with this ammunition. So this will kind of give us an understanding of what these rounds can do in a real world situation where you're shooting at long distances, and we'll be able to see what these bullets can actually do, what kind of wound channel they create, what kind of expansion occurs, and how deep they penetrate. So I want to just show you guys the rifle that I'm using for this test. So I'm going to be using my Ruger M77 Hawkeye Alaskan. And this rifle is interesting because it only has a 20-inch barrel, which is really short for a 300 Win Mag. And here's my Silencer Co. Omega 300, and I have a Coltac Corset suppressor cover on there. Suppressor covers are absolutely critical when you're shooting long range. I have an Atlas bipod here. I have an Athlon 2.5 to 15 power second focal plane scope. I prefer second focal plane. And this stock here is actually not the factory stock. This is a Hogue stock that has a full bed block in it. It has an aluminum bed block that goes all the way through the entire stock, all the way to the buttstock, okay, from the fore end to the comb, okay. So let's see what happens, guys. Let's see how many pieces of wood these rounds will penetrate through at 500 yards. And let's see what kind of expansion we get. I'm really curious to see how that LRX will perform at 500 yards with a 2,000 foot per second impact velocity. So I hope you guys enjoy the video, and thanks for watching. And what I've actually done is I've taken one of these splatterburst targets and turned it horizontally and stapled it onto these 2 blocks of wood, so this way I can see my impacts through my spotting scope. I'll just give you guys a look at the target one more time. And shooting conditions, it's around 73 degrees Fahrenheit right now. Unusually warm for this time of year. So great day to do this test. So we got all these Douglas fir 2x12s screwed together. I put a screw in the corner of each board, okay? Nothing fancy here. Got some blocks on the back to keep the impact from knocking the blocks off my stand here, okay? So it stays stable when it gets hit by the bullets, because even at this distance, the impact energy is going to be still pretty significant. It's like a 454 Casull at point blank. So still a ton of energy at this distance. So I got these blocks here just to keep the wood from falling off when they get hit. So let's see what happens here, guys. I'm really excited. Gonna be shooting from down there. All right, guys, it looks like I got 2 hits, possibly 3. It's very windy, so I think maybe one of the shots, the wind blew the bullet. So let's go check it out, see what kind of hits we made. Looks like I hit all 3. So there is a wind blowing from the left to the right. So I was aiming in here and the wind blew my bullets over here. So we have 1 perfect hit right there, right in the meat of the wood. Then we had 2 hits up here. And I think this hit, I'm not sure if it exited out or not, but that's okay because this one's nicely in the center there, and then this one's also in a good part of the wood. So all right, guys, I'm losing light here. 175 grain LRX. All right, guys, so I want to go over the results of the test with you now. I was able to recover all of the bullets. Check that out, guys. So we're going to look at these bullets up close. I'm going to weigh them to see what kind of weight retention we got. And I'm going to take some measurements to see what kind of expansion we got. So I managed to recover all of them. So I had the wood set up just as the way you're looking at it. I had 10 pieces of wood on the left and 10 pieces of wood on the right. These are 18 inches long. They're 2x12 framing lumber, and I screwed them all together. So I have all the wood here. I unscrewed the wood. We're going to see how many pieces of lumber the different bullets penetrated through. I want to just summarize the results for you now, though. So the deepest penetrating load, not surprisingly, was the Choice Ammunition 175 grain LRX, and that one had an impact velocity at 500 yards of around 2,000 feet per second, and it almost penetrated through 7 boards. That's a lot of penetration, guys. So I took 2 shots with the LRX. I had 2 hits with the LRX, and one of them penetrated through 5 boards, and the other one penetrated through 6.5, almost 7. So we're going to say 5 and 6 for the LRX. And if you haven't seen some of my other lumber penetration test videos, that's the same amount of penetration as my 500 Smith & Wesson Magnum at 10 yards with 350 grain and 420 grain Underwood ammo extreme penetrators. Okay, so that is a lot of penetration, guys. The same amount of penetration at 500 yards as a 500 Smith & Wesson extreme penetrator at 10 yards. Okay, just to kind of give you something to have a comparison to. Okay, now the Accubonds surprisingly penetrated the least amount of wood, and the Federal 180 grain soft point penetrated a little more than the Accubond. The Accubonds penetrated through 3 and 4 boards, so that's about the same amount of penetration as my Glock 20 with buffalo bore heavy outdoorsman 220 grain hard cast bear loads. Those can penetrate through 3 of these 2x12 boards. And my 44 Magnum snub nose with 305 grain hard cast bear loads can penetrate through 4 of these boards. Okay, so the Accubond penetrated through 3 and 4 boards, which is about the same as a 10 millimeter or 44 Magnum with bear loads. Okay, just to give you something to compare to. And the Federal 180 grain soft point penetrated through 4 boards. Okay, so that's the same amount of penetration as a 44 Magnum with bear loads at 10 yards away. All right, so very interesting results. I was expecting the Accubond to penetrate a lot more than it did, and I didn't expect the Federal soft point to penetrate reliably through 4 boards. All of the shots penetrated through 4 boards. And I was also surprised by the Federal soft point that the cup and core stayed together. They didn't separate, and there was really good expansion on it. And all of these bullets expanded really well, so they passed the 500-yard test. Big thumbs up for the LRX, the Accubond, and the Federal non-typical soft point. All of them expanded very nicely, mushroomed nicely, and I'll show you guys the bullets. So I'm going to repeat this test, but I'm going to do it at 800 yards with the same ammunition, and we're going to see the difference between 500 yards and 800 yards. But I'm going to do that test in the near future, and when I do that test, I will compare it to the results from this test. So I want to go through all the boards with you one by one and just show you the wound channel here. So we're going to start with the boards on the left. Here we have the hole from the Accubond, the Federal soft point, Accubond, LRX, Accubond. This is the first board, all right? And here we have the back of the first board. You can see some expansion going on already. Back of the first board. Here we have the second board, and here's our LRX hole. You can clearly tell it's from the LRX because there's no lead deposited. You can see the lead dust in these other holes. So that's one of the advantages of using a solid copper expanding bullet. You don't have to worry about lead contaminating your meat. So you can clearly see that the Accubond expanded much better than the Federal soft point and the LRX. This is just the second board, and you can clearly see how the hole is much bigger from the Accubonds than from the Federal soft point. This is the Federal soft point, this is the LRX, and you can see the Accubond's just much more expansion with the Accubond. I wasn't expecting that. And here's the back of the second board here. Okay, nice exit holes. I would say those are about 50 caliber in diameter. So they're doing a lot of damage as they're plowing through. And so here we have the third board. You can clearly see the Accubond hole Look at how big that hole is, guys. Here's my thumb for comparison. So that hole is like probably an inch in diameter. And here we have our Federal soft point hole, still pretty big. Here's the Accubond. Here's another Accubond. Here's the LRX. But look at the difference between the LRX up here and then the Federal soft point and the Accubond. You can see how solid copper expanding bullets, they don't expand as much as jacketed bullets do, okay, with lead cores. So that's something to keep in mind. They will penetrate deeper, but they don't leave as large of a wound channel as jacketed bullets do, okay? And here's the back of the third board, all right? Nice exit holes there. And then here we have the fourth board. One of the Accubonds was stuck here in the fourth board. This is me just trying to drill it to get it out. Here we have the Federal soft point hole. Another Accubond got stuck in this one. LRX still going through. Accubond stuck in that one. Okay. And here's the back of the fourth board. Okay. And then here we have the fifth board. Here we have the Federal soft point. Got stuck in the fifth board. I pulled it out. And here we have a little dent from the Accubond, which just barely poked through the back of the fourth board, one of the Accubonds. And then one of the Accubonds actually did penetrate through the fourth board, and it was embedded in here. Okay, you can see how it was embedded in there. All right. And here we have the sixth board, and LRX was stuck in the sixth board on the left side, the left block of 10. Okay, so I'm going to share with you guys now some of the other boards here. So here we have the first board. So we have our LRX here, Federal soft point, Federal soft point, Federal soft point, Federal soft point. Okay, first board, here's the back of the first board. All of them penetrated through nicely. Nice exit holes there, good size exit holes. And here we have the second board. Here's our LRX, and then these are our Federal soft points. You can see nice holes, okay, good size holes. And here's the back of the second board. Okay. Here we have the third board. Here we have our LRX, and you can see the difference in diameter between the LRX hole and the Federal soft point holes. All right, you see how those holes are much larger in comparison. I wouldn't say much larger, but probably like 25% larger. And then here's the back of the third board, okay? Some pretty nice exit holes there. And here's the fourth board. Okay, they're all still passing through. Here's the LRX hole. Look at the size of the LRX hole compared to the Federal soft point hole. Okay, huge difference. And here's the back of the fourth board. Okay, they all penetrated through 4. And then here we have the fifth board. And here's where all of our bullets got stuck for the Federal soft points. Okay, you can see they were all stuck in the fifth board. Okay, you can see where they were stuck. All right, and this one I had to drill to get out. And then the LRX is still penetrating through. That's pretty impressive. And then here we have the sixth board. Okay, penetrated through the sixth board, the LRX. And check that exit hole out. It's pretty cool. And then here we have the seventh board, and it was actually embedded really deep into the seventh board. I would say at least halfway through. So about 6.5 boards. That's a lot of penetration. Like I said, that's the same amount of penetration I get with my 500 Smith & Wesson Magnum with a 6.5-inch barrel using some Underwood ammo extreme penetrators at 10 yards. Okay, so That's a lot of penetration. So I want to show you guys the bullets up close so we can see what kind of expansion we got and what kind of weight retention we got. So stay tuned. All right, guys, so here are our bullets. On the right here, these three are the 180 grain Accubonds. These two in the middle, the 175 grain LRX. And then these five on the left are the Federal 180 grain soft points. So I want to just go through these bullets with you and show them to you up close so you can see what they look like after hitting this wood at 500 yards. Again, an impact velocity of around 2,000 feet per second. Okay, here's that Federal 180 grain soft point. You can see that the jacket stayed with the core. So I don't know if they have some kind of a bonding process here. I know that for this particular factory load, they used to use the Spear Hot-Cor. So I don't know if this is the Spear Hot-Cor or not. I'll have to do some more research into it, but you can see that the core and the jacket stayed together and very nice expansion at 500 yards. Here's another Federal 180 grain soft point. Lots of expansion. You can see the jacket peeled all the way back to the base of the bullet. So very nice expansion here, guys. Okay. And here's another Federal 180 grain soft point. Lots of expansion. Look at that. Check that out, how the jacket just peeled all the way back to the base. And here's another one. This is the fourth one. Okay, check that out. Lots and lots of expansion with these. These are great bullets. I was a little skeptical about them, but these are a great general purpose bullet. Honestly, even at long ranges, these things perform well. Check that out. And they are very accurate too. And then here's the last Federal 180 grain soft point. This one seems to be a lot more mangled than the other ones. I don't know if maybe it hit a knot or something, but that's a lot of expansion there. Check that out. Look at all that lead. That's crazy. And then here we have our Barnes LRX. And this was the one that I was really curious about to see what kind of expansion would occur. And as you can see, all of the petals peeled back nicely. Okay, check that out. Okay, very nice expansion. You can see actually the blue tip is still in there. Okay, but perfect expansion. Look at that. All the petals peeled back perfectly at 500 yards, impact velocity 2,000 feet per second. And the base of the bullet is a little bit mangled. That's just from me trying to get it out of the wood with some needle nose pliers, so you can ignore that. But perfect expansion. Look at that, guys. Beautiful. This is what we want to see. And then here's the second LRX, and you'll notice that it's actually missing two petals. And I don't know if those petals broke off when I was trying to pull it out of the wood, but I did manage to find one petal. And this petal was actually in one of the boards that it penetrated through, but it wasn't embedded in, so it must have sheared off one of the petals as it was penetrating through the wood. But still, as you can see, very reliable expansion. Check that out, guys. And then let's look at the Accubonds. Here we have our 180 grain Accubonds, and you can see a lot of expansion here. Much more expansion, actually, than the Federal soft points. Check that out. You can clearly see how the Accubond on the right expanded more than the Federal soft point. I definitely was not expecting this much expansion from the Accubond. Okay. Check that out. Look at how the jacket peeled all the way back to the base. Check that out, guys. That's just crazy. Look at that. Lots and lots of expansion. I definitely was not expecting this much expansion at 500 yards. So Accubond is an excellent bullet, guys. I love the Accubond. I think it's the best general purpose bullet. And here's another Accubond. Okay, you can see the jacket peeled back pretty far. Check that out, guys. That's just a perfect mushroom. Look at that. So I'm going to get my calipers and we're going to measure the expansion on these. But look at this one. This one, the jacket peeled really far back. Look at that. Check that out. It peeled back further than the base, actually. You see that little piece of the jacket there went all the way past the base. That's just crazy. So got my calipers here. Let's take some measurements. We're going to start with the federals. So here's our first federal, and we got expansion of 0.45, and let's measure from the other side, 0.50. Okay, so almost 50 caliber. Here's another one. We got 0.484 and 0.40. Okay, so looks like around 45 caliber to 50 caliber of expansion. 0.411 and 0.507. Here's the other federal soft point. 0.43 and 0.51. And here's the last federal soft point. This one looks crazy. 0.46, and let's try to get the other side here. 0.58. Wow. So I'm going to say that the federal soft point expanded to around 45 caliber. Now let's try the LRX, see what we get with the LRX. So we got 0.45 and 0.47. So roughly the same. And here we have the other LRX, which is missing the pedals, so we can't really measure, but 0.36 and 0.39. Okay, so the LRX also expanding to around 45 caliber. And then here's the Accubond. Look at the difference with the Accubond. 0.55 and 0.46. So a lot more expansion. Here's another Accubond. We got 0.49 and we got 0.42. And then here's another one. We got 0.49 and we got 0.52. So I'm going to just kind of estimate in my head, more or less. I think the Accubond expands to around 50 caliber. And the LRX will expand to around 45 caliber, and the federal soft points around 45 caliber as well. So I'm going to get my digital reloading scale and I'm going to take some weight measurements now and see how much weight these bullets retained. Alright guys, so I got my reloading scale. I got this 100-gram weight just to make sure that it's zeroed. You can see 100.01, so we're pretty much zeroed out. Let's start with the federal soft points. We got 141.2 grains for the first federal soft point. That's actually really good. Here's the second federal soft point, 126 grains. Here's the third federal soft point, 138.2 grains. Here's the fourth federal soft point, 151.1 grains. And here's the fifth federal soft point, 143.5 grains. So a lot of variation there. Now let's go into the LRX. Here's the LRX that has all the pedals on it. As you can see, all the pedals are still there. Let's weigh this one. 172.8. Wow, that is impressive, guys. Almost 100% weight retention after penetrating through 6 Douglas fir 2x12s at 500 yards, only losing 3 grains. That is just incredible. Here's the other LRX. This one lost 2 of its petals, as you can see. And I'll put one of the petals on the scale. So we got 170.4 grains with the petal. And I'm going to just take this petal off now. And we got 167.7 with the missing petals. So that's still a lot of weight retention. You know, what's really interesting about these LRXs is that when you look at them, they're basically kind of just like a solid bullet, in the sense that these petals are not really that large. If you were to remove these petals, you still have this massive core, and it kind of functions like a solid. So very interesting. And then let's go into the Accubonds. Here's the first Accubond. We got 146.1. And the second Accubond, we got 142.1. And the third Accubond, we got 144.4. So the Accubonds had much more consistent weight retention than the Federal Soft Points. The Federal Soft Points had a huge variation in weight retention, as much as 20 grains between the lightest and the heaviest, versus the Accubonds only varied a couple of grains. So that's pretty much it for this one, guys. Stay tuned to my channel for the same test, but at 800 yards. We'll see if these bullets all expand. If you want to see more long-range shooting videos, check out my long-range shooting playlist. If you want to see more 300 Win Mag videos, check out my 300 Win Mag playlist. And if you want to see more penetration tests, I'll leave links to all of these playlists in the top right corner of this video. Other than that, check out my sponsors. I have some great deals. You can get up to 10% off of multiple different products. So check my sponsors out. But that's all I got for this one. Take care. God bless. And don't forget the 3 Ps. Prepare, practice, and persevere.